Everyone. In today's video, we'll see what are variables in JavaScript. So, before we go into the concept of variables in terms of JavaScript, let's see what is variable in terms of real world. Okay, so in real world, right, whenever we ask you to do any computation, right, because everything around you is data, right? So if I ask you to do any computation, for example, let's say if I ask you to add two numbers, so what you would do, right? How would your brain process it? Right, first you would ask the first number which you want to add. For example, say I give you this number, let's add 5. Then you'll ask the second number, which is the 10. So now what you're doing, right, you are storing this numbers in some part of your memory. And the moment I ask you to say add two numbers, what you'll do the computation, say 5 plus 10 and 15. Then you'll add these numbers and you'll save the output to again some part of your memory. So if I ask you now what was the first number I gave you, you would be easily able to recollect it since you have stored this number somewhere. Same goes for the second number and same goes for the output. So you're storing this number somewhere to do computation, right? So let's see, how this gets translated in terms of a programming language. So let's see the same example here, right? So when you want to say store that number in computer memory, because previously you were doing into your own memory, right? So you can write something like this, meaning you are storing 5 in, say, x, which is, let's say, for time being, let's say, is some part of computer's memory. Similarly, then you're keeping 10 in y, which is again, let's take that some part of your computer memory. And then you will have a third part of your memory which will have, say, 5 plus 10. Okay, so what you're doing here, right, basically you're moving 5 to x, which represents a memory, 10 to y. So this is not actually equal, right? It is means whatever is on the right hand side is stored on the left hand side, and the left hand side is nothing but some kind of a memory. Okay, similarly, you can also write this as, instead of writing 5 plus 10, because you know that 5 is located in x and say 10 is inside y. So you can write the same thing, right? So in terms of the computation, this is what is happening in terms of computation, what is happening in your brain. So same thing is happening with your programming. Now, if you do the same thing in JavaScript, right? So JavaScript tells you that if you want to uh, store a number, right, like this, right, so instead of doing this, right, you should use a keyword called as let. So if you want to declare something, let's call it as variable. So this x is variable. I'll explain why this is called as variable, but let's, for timing, I'm just extending the same thing, right? So whatever computation you're doing with the memory, JavaScript tells you to do that with a let keyword. So now let me take the same example. So the same thing in JavaScript is written like this. Okay. So I'll remove this part and let's do the same for Y, and let's do the same thing for Z. Okay. So I'll remove this thing because now we are doing in terms of JavaScript. Okay. So we can break this further. So when you declare a variable, what do you mean by declaring a variable? So you're saying that I'm going to use X as some memory to store a number which I want to add in the future, right? You're getting an error because you're declaring it twice, that you already declared here and you're declaring it again. So what I'll do, right, again, for the sake of understanding, I'll just comment this part. So what you're saying here, you're saying that you're just declaring a variable. You're not storing or assigning anything. You're just declaring the variable. Now you want to say, okay, I've declared the variable. I want to assign some value to it, right? So now what you have done, you have assigned a value of 5 to x. So this part is called as variable declaration. and this part is called as variable initialization. Okay, so you declare the variable on line number 10, and on line number 2 you are initializing or you're setting some value to it. What you can do, right, instead of doing this, right, there's the shorthand version, right, you can do the same thing in one line also. So let's say this. Okay, again you're getting error because you're declaring it twice. You cannot declare it twice, you have to declare it only once. So if you write something like this, let x, right, this is done. You cannot assign again. Okay, you cannot declare again. Sorry, you can assign again, but you cannot declare again. Okay, comment this line. So what I said, you can combine this two line and have a shortened version which says, let x is 5. So this basically means that x is a variable which is holding a value of 5. Now coming to the main part, right, why it is called as variable. The reason it is called variable, right, suppose you add these two numbers, right. Let's go to the previous example. Then you say let z is equal to x plus y. So once that is done, suppose I give you another problem that instead of adding 5 and 10, let's add say 35 and 40. So when you do the same thing, right, instead of creating say another variable like say this, right, that 40 or 35, what you can do, right, you can, because this is like creating more memory. So instead of creating more memory, what you can do, you can reuse this previous values. Okay, so whatever variables you created, you are just reusing them. Just see one more thing, right, I'm not using let again. So what I'm doing, I'm just reinitializing it or reassigning. Okay, I'm reassigning new values to x and y because I initialized them initially with some values like say 5 and 10. Now I'm reassigning them to the new values, and this is why they are called as variable, because they can hold variable sets of values or multiple set of values across their lives. Okay, so you can do the same thing for z. So z now again holds x plus 5. So if I print z here, say let me print z here first time. Let me say first time. Let's see what's the value of z, and we'll do it after the second time also. So again, to run this program, what you can do, you can go to the extensions. There's an extension called as code runner. Install this. I have already installed it. So once you install it, I'll close this. Once you install it, just click F1, search for run code, and click on it. So you see, first time the value was 15 because 5 plus 10, and second time the value was 75 because you reassigned these values. So what you're doing, you're basically reusing the same variables for doing the computation again, because you don't want to create multiple variables every time. Now there's another way of declaring variables in JavaScript, right? So let's see an example. Suppose I ask you to calculate say area of a circle. Now you know that for area of a circle the formula is say the 3.14, which is pi. So let's say pi into radius into radius. So what you can do, right, because you know that you need two variables here. One is pi and one is radius. So let's say I create this value, say pi. Uh, so we know that value is around something like 1.3.14. Now let's create another variable which is called as say radius. And for the first example, let's say the value is 5. Now to hold the area, you will create another variable. So let's say area, and now you can write say pi into radius into radius. Okay, and if you print the area, say the area is, you can print whatever is there inside area and you'll get the area. Now if I ask you to say no, okay, let me let uh, change the radius. Let's change the radius and give me area of some another circle. again I cannot again use let variable, because if you see it's saying, you cannot redeclare because it is already declared on line number 27, so there's no need to redeclare, but you can always reassign. So instead of 5, now you're using 6. But the fun part is here, if you have to do the same thing for pi, what would you put? You put 3.14 because that's the constant value for pi. So pi never changes. So whatever, how big is your circle doesn't matter, how small is your circle doesn't matter. The value of pi will remain constant or fixed, right? So for those kind of variables, which are fixed irrespective of what you do, you can use JavaScript tells you to use a different keyword. So instead of using let, JavaScript asks you to use const. So const basically represent a fixed value or a constant value. Okay, because this value is not going to change over the period of time. So I'm printing the area, but we have to do the calculation again because this time it's new radius. So let's do the same formula again. Okay, now let's run this program, the same thing. Hit F1, run code. You see the area first time is 78.5, second time it is 113 point something, right? So we are doing the same thing again, right? We are reusing the variables. Now let's see one more interesting example, right? Suppose you have declared pi as a constant. What happens when you try to change this value? So instead of 3.14, you're saying, okay, now it should be 3.4 point something like this, right? Any example. And if you run it again, so again F1, you should get an error, because what you're doing here, right? If you see, it says there's an error, your assignment, it's a type error saying assignment to a constant variable. So what you saying, you declared this variable as constant, meaning that it would always remain fixed, but now you're violating that statement and you're trying to reassign to it, right? So a constant variable cannot be reassigned. Okay, because once it is defined with some values, it is done. You cannot do that again and again. It's only one time activity. Just keep in mind, only make those values, only create those values with const keyword which you know that will always remain constant. Okay. General examples are, the distance between say earth and the moon, earth and sun, right? All those things, right? Or the radius of the earth. These are constant examples of, constant values. Okay, so I think there's another way of declaring variable in JavaScript using a keyword called as var. I'm not going to cover var in this video. I'll cover that in later video when we do a comparison between let and const. The reason why I'm not covering var here is because you can do something like this using var, right? Because I think it's a good practice to use let. It's not a good practice to use var, but still, if you're using legacy browsers and legacy code, you might encounter this var keyword. But for new code, whatever new programming you're doing, right, make sure you don't use var. You always use either let or constant based on the situation. Okay, I hope you liked this video. I'll close this video here. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe the channel. Thank you.